So Nava, you were involved in this study that really sort of set the groundwork for commitment savings, and has inspired a lot of follow-on research. How do you think about commitment savings now based on that original work and what was found and these variations that a lot have been tried? What do we really know about commitment savings and why it works?
So that original study for me was very much motivated, even the design of the product itself was very much motivated by what I was seeing in the field in West Africa and East Africa. So what I had seen was, and I've been living there for some time and realized that farmers who go through many cycles, they were having tremendous difficulty being able to save for what they call the hungry season. So they'd have a ton of money in January and be starving actually in June, unfortunately. And some of them had been really remarkable at finding techniques to help themselves be able to save the money when they had it. And so I remember one woman who timed the planting of her sweet potato crops compared to all her other crops, so that the sweet potato crops came due only when the school fees were due. And when I asked her, why, it seems more efficient to crop them all at the same time and have them come up at the same time. And she said, oh, no, then I would spend the money. Or maybe someone else in my household would spend the money. She talked about herself, right. But we can talk later about how that also is worrisome in terms of the household. But regardless, for her, the kind of mental accounting and then really serious commitment of not having the sweet potatoes be able to come due until that particular moment was really, really important. And then I met another woman who had a lockbox in her house, and she even told me where it was. It was, there was a thatched roof, and it was underneath the thing, and it was locked. And there was a key, and I said, who has the key? And she said, my neighbor. And I have to go and ask my neighbor anytime I want, and she knows what I'm trying to save for, so she really grills me. Right? And so for me, I was, really stunned once I started to study. I was in my first and second year of graduate school when I came back from the field, and I realized that our basic models of lifetime theories of income and savings and consumption really didn't take into account these types of strategies that people were using. And yet the question was, how important could these things be actually? Maybe they were just anecdotes, maybe they were just random things that people did, but they really wouldn't have an effect compared to some more basic things. And so the question of, it's interesting that the initiative is called the Financial Access Initiative. Because I think when we think of access, we think of, for example, providing people with bank accounts. But access is something where providing access to the kinds of products that might really be needed in that setting is just as much providing access in general to a need. And so at the time we got a lot of criticism from those in microfinance. First of all, there wasn't a lot of focus on micro savings, well, no, but also, the idea that so much has been written, obviously, about people in resource-constrained environments and poor individuals that really need liquidity at critical moments. So the fact that we were actually taking liquidity away from people seemed just terribly unfair and not right. In addition to the fact that it was contrary to economic theory that anyone would want such a thing.
Right.
So then the fact that 28% of people took up this product, that these were exactly the people that we found in the survey mechanisms that had this kind of time inconsistency or present bias that we think about, and that it had, by some measures 80% impact, by other measures 360% impact over a year's time in terms of savings while having the exact same interest rate, was a wake-up call to the importance of design. And to
some of these products that have come after this following in that way, because it was this is crazy.
Yeah.
People shouldn't want an account that's
absolutely
harder to use than the accounts that they have. But we've had some additional tests that in many ways are equally puzzling. So we've got DuPont Robinson, who used the lock boxes, like the woman in your story, but the lock boxes that they have the key to are the most effective lock boxes. And then you've got Ginet, Goldberg, and Yang in Malawi finding that access to a commitment savings account helps to save, but they don't save in that account. So what's really going on?
That's great.
Because
So those two are very different mechanisms that are at play. And I think, when you think about the seed product, the commitment savings product, it was a very crude product. So we really made it highly committed. You had to write, so not only was the key at the bank, but you had to, write a lot of things in order to be able to take out the money. And in fact, in pilots, we had done, so there's some work actually that David Leibson and others are doing on how illiquid you need to make a commitment device, right? Because we really ramped up the illiquidity, in large part because the clients asked us to. So we did pilots where they were able to take out the money in much larger, easier ways, and in fact they asked for more commitment. Even in terms of the lock, I went to a lot of clients' houses and they had opened the box, they had ripped the lock out, but then they had retaped it themselves. Now, that suggests that you need the maximum level of commitment. I don't think that's necessarily true for everyone, and it's not necessarily true depending on what you're saving for. So the fact that it's sufficient for me to just have a lock on there and for me to hold the key, what does that mean in terms of impact? That means that all that is needed is for me in my mind to create a sacred boundary around this, what I'm saving for. And so some of the work recently on labeling and reminders really move along that. I mean, they're not very costly commitments, but they create a sacred boundary in your mind. And so even if you hold the key, that is a very strong symbol of your commitment that you've made. And to the extent that I'm motivated by those kind of keeping myself to my personal rules, to the extent that I have a ton of things on my mind, I have a big overload cognitively, and I need things to be in categories, that's sufficient. And so a lot of our I think the next work that needs to be out there is, what are the sufficient boundaries? And let's not make things more costly than they need to be. So we can make optimal levels of costliness. And this might be different for different people.
This is a big problem for the institution offering the account,
yes,
right?
Hugely.
For the institution that wants to offer a product that's actually useful and fulfills these goals, is that we're in many ways talking about clients who are just barely self-aware enough to know that they need something, but how do they know which is the right product for them? Are they going to make good choices? And for affordability, the bank really is only going to be able to offer one
Exactly.
option.
So, there's supply and demand issues here. On the supply side, there is, how difficult is it to customize products? Now, I think, for example, when we were doing the work, it was extremely difficult to customize. But increasingly now, with a lot of the mobile apps, for example, it might be much easier than we think to actually customize these products. Then there's the demand side. If I have a menu of products, assuming I don't have too large of a menu, because that could create other problems.
Well, I mean, there's costs to the user.
Right, exactly, of having to figure out which one to
Right.
use. But let's say I have a menu product, and, importantly, let's say that you as the bank have been able to figure out how to ask the right questions of the client so that they can recognize themselves in which product is going to be ideal for them. Now, that's a big if, but I think it's possible. A lot of what we had to do in pilot testing the product and training the marketers who are going door to door to sell the product was to be able to say, are you this kind of person to the client? And so that the client could recognize themselves as someone who's regret in the past spending too much money and had this moment of wishing that someone would take the money away from them and that they had this bond in place. Learning how to do that in a more nuanced way, you can imagine very easily an online survey that then says, you would be 80% this product and 20% this product, and now you can choose. So this actually takes us back to the Malawi question about why people will open accounts. We had the same problem, and then they'll be dormant. So 28% people took up in our commitment savings product, but the people who are really driving that enormous change in savings that we talked about are a small proportion of that. And that was a wider problem that we didn't solve, which was, when we first started, there was 50% dormancy in all savings accounts. And that's, I think, everywhere. So there you need deposit side incentives, which, we didn't have a lot. I mean, the box is something, it reminds you of that. Later on, we had deposit collectors that, surprising to the bank, where clients were willing to pay for someone to come and take out money, way more than the amount of money it would take to get to the bank, right? Individual clients were willing to pay for someone to come and take the money out of their hands, because they told me, for example, it was like having a garbage collector come every week. You know that's the time you need to take out your garbage, so you're reminded of that.
Right.
And, with more and more people being able to be on electronic and automatic transfers, there are many types of deposit side incentives that you can use, so that in that moment of, let's call it stochastic sophistication, in that moment of, wow, I realize I am that kind of person, tomorrow I may forget, at least I have brought in a process that will allow not just the money that I put in now to not be taken out, but really a longer process where that money will continue to be deposited in.